Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Amada Mission podcast. Today, the NFL market for running backs sucks. Here are our opinions later, okay. And then we talk about the NFC North. Bears, will they suck again? We don't know, but here are our thoughts on it. Well, welcome back, everybody. Kick things off. I see Josh. You kind of dripped out right now. You want to kind of share some of your drip with us?
Yeah, I'm totally stealing Justin Fields' jersey, baby. I'm like every other Chicago fan right now. I'm super hyped to talk about them. Um, we're all excited for the season over here, and I'm totally acting like this is my own. My brother got this for his birthday. I asked him, "Can I please use this?" Because I don't think I could wear my Chicago Bears hats with a mic and get that working. So it
Hmm.
feels pretty comfortable, and I feel pretty comfortable as a Bears fan. So can't wait to talk
Hmm.
about them.
Yeah. Quick, who's your favorite Bears player of all time?
Mine? Ooh,
Yeah,
that's tough. Devin Hester. It's got to be
Devin
Devin Hester.
Hester.
I grew up
Goaded
watching him,
pick.
man.
Uh huh. Yeah, he was a lot of fun. All those punt kick returns just completely changed everything with special teams. So it's fun
Yeah, my
stuff.
favorite was when he kicked off the Super Bowl, just returning it to the end zone. I'm like, okay, we got this in the bag. If that's how it's gonna start out. Like for 2 weeks, like the one thing you got to prepare for with that entire Bears team was one their defense, but also Devin Hester. So
Yeah.
I'm like, if he still scored, like we got this in the bag. We'll just every time the Colts kick it, we'll just return it back. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, it didn't work out that way. But
Unfortunately,
I'll
Rex
always
Grossman
remember
was
that
there.
moment. That was probably the highest I felt as a Bears fan, like how high I
Hmm.
was on that team. Just
Yeah.
little young Josh.
Uh huh. Yeah, but yeah, today we have a lot of fun things to talk about. We're obviously going over the NFC North today, but to kick things off, there's been a lot of drama with the NFL running back market. Apparently, there was like a Zoom call or something, but um, there's obviously discontent a lot with a lot of running backs with just not getting the contracts that they want, and there's like all this discussion on like how should the NFL do it? How should players, agents, teams kind of handle the situation? And it's tricky when you see like other players getting contracts too. Then you're like, who's deserving, who's not deserving. But I mean, I guess how do you view the market?
I feel bad for them. I really feel
Hmm.
bad for them, but it's kind of like organizations and franchises are kind of being cynical on how they would like to pay their running backs or how they would like to envision the entire like cycle when you draft a running back and how they choose to allocate that money towards the running backs relative to the other positions. Like
Hmm.
Josh Jacobs, Saquon Barkley, they should be getting above franchise tag deals for sure for like the value they bring to their teams, especially Saquon Barkley. I'm glad he was managed to reach a 1 year deal for $11 million, so he can kind of prove his worth. But it shouldn't have come to that. Like that entire tenure with the Giants when he was healthy, he was kind of carrying that team, like through different regimes,
Hmm.
the different coaches, and we've been talking about some of the free agents still on the market that are good quality backs, and I think part of it is due to the teams just don't want to pay the money because, like, if you look at Ezekiel Elliott, Dalvin Cook, Leonard Fournette, Kareem Hunt, Joe Mixon before he took a pay cut to re-sign with the Bengals. Aaron Jones took a pay cut to re-sign with the Packers, and then Henry was available for trade because the Titans foresaw he would be too expensive to keep, but they ended up keeping Henry, obviously. My
Hmm.
point is like teams are not afraid to let these running backs go. Like even the Titans, like I mentioned last, they drafted Tajay Spears, and from what we know about Tajay Spears, like going over him through the draft process, like he was one of my favorite backs, and I think he could easily lead a backfield. So they're just
Hmm.
preparing for when Henry like hits that 30 age like threshold value where we're like, oh, they're clearly too old. Like we'll just grab another back.
Hmm.
Look at Elijah Mitchell years past. Like why? Like and they also drafted Trey Sermon in the same year. Why do you need a Raheem Mostert or Jeff Wilson when you could just draft the next one essentially? It's kind of like every team is doing that now. Even the Bears, they didn't want to sign Montgomery for the money, so they signed Foreman for lesser money, drafted the back, elevated Herbert, who was drafted a couple years ago. So it's just the state where I love one of these tweets where all these running backs were reacting to like Matt Miller's tweet, where it's just like number one, draft the running back. Two, play the running back. If he's good, franchise the running back. Then franchise the running back again, and then draft the running back. Kind of that cycle.
Hmm.
And a lot of these running backs reacted to Twitter on that, and I feel bad for them. So it's it's just a bad market right now for the
Hmm.
running backs because it's so saturated with good ones.
Hmm. Yeah, and like I understand to an extent the team's position of like just how easy it is to replace the running back position, and like I understand where they're coming from there, but again, it's like there are elite running backs in the league that aren't getting signed, which or not getting at least extended with good contracts, which is obviously the big issue. Um, yeah, and like I feel like the only solution that I've been able to think of that could like in my head come close to I guess fixing some of the issues having like a player option within running back rookie contracts where after 2 years the running back can opt to like end their rookie contract and basically re-sign a new deal, but they can write out the 4 year if they want, and like it kind of puts the ball in the running backs court where if they want they can technically write out that 4 year contract and I guess bet on them having a good year 3 and 4 to get re-signed. Or with a lot of running backs these days, they do come out of the gate pretty good, startable players. And so within that first 2 years, if they think that they've shown promise, they can end that contract and then try to get maybe a 3 4 year deal on a bigger salary and big more guaranteed money basically than what we're seeing running backs nowadays. That get the 4 years, potential fifth year option, and then a franchise tag, and then it being 2 years of really good pay following that 4 year rookie contract.
That's a that's an interesting idea on the surface, but like in a vacuum, that would be good. I'm just looking at players like Brees Hall and Javante Williams right now who are coming back from ACL injuries, and they
Hmm.
recently got drafted to their teams.
Hmm.
So then the other side of it is, okay, what if they get hurt their rookie season or their second season when they're up for that payday under that new like proposal you have? How would that work for their market? That I think 2 years is kind of like the other extreme where like you would need to try and find a medium. That would be it's a good proposal, but things would be need to work out and like how would teams address that situation because they're like, oh, we're taking a risk by paying this guy if he's gonna hit the injury bug
Hmm.
all the time.
Yeah, I mean that's why I mentioned it being like a player option where the player can exercise ending his contract early basically and opting to be re-signed after a second year, or in the case of an injury, you could technically continue to write out that 4 year initial rookie deal that I guess you would sign. And so there's like it's just basically a contract system to help better protect running backs in a way that they can either have that 4 year or have a 2 year option basically of if you're able to prove yourself in 2 years or you think that you can get a bigger contract than you might get later on in your career after 2 years, I mean like go for it. But then if like with injuries and whatnot, if you think that if you don't think the team's willing to offer that contract, then you can technically try to play your best year 3 4, and if you do play good football, then I mean it's still hard to get contracts at that stage still, but at least you'll have adamant time afterwards after your injury to I guess show and see if you are worth you know money afterwards. But again, it is a tricky market, and I
Yeah.
think in the current stage, um, I don't see why teams would stop. I guess just because no one's really countering, no team in the league's really countering that strategy right now of just kind of undercutting running backs.
Yeah, and I think the only exception to this is Christian McCaffrey because Carolina didn't have a good enough QB where they could allocate that sort of money to it.
Hmm.
So they're just like, okay, we might as well extend him. And what happened to him? He got traded to San Francisco because Carolina can get the most value out of that.
Hmm.
Like because he's one of like the best players on the team that's not being incentivized to play consistently because they're a horrible team
Hmm.
last year. So um, it's I wouldn't look at it where like Christian McCaffrey should become the norm because that's
Hmm.
very difficult. Like if you're considering like the elite quarterbacks, like Justin Herbert just got paid, like along the same lines as um, Lamar Jackson and some of the other quarterbacks what they're going for. I think he got 262.5.
Hmm.
Yeah, 262.5 million for 5 years, and trying to look at the other QBs that got signed. And then Lamar Jackson got 260 for 5 years. Jalen Hurts got 255 million for 5 years. Then you're looking at Joe Burrow, um, who Joe Mixon already took a pay cut, so the Bengals are thinking, okay, he's going to get around the same kind of money, if not more, because he's done more than Justin Herbert in the playoffs. So it's just a really tough market for like backs like Eckler, like J.K. Dobbins if he's able to stay healthy, and then like any Eagles running backs that comes up and looking for a payday. And in fact, I wanted to run by the CBA with you because I noticed for like the franchise tag values, quarterbacks were 21 million. Um, and in 2023, so like quarterbacks were 21 million in 2017. I should preface that.
Hmm.
Um, and now they're 32 million a year.
Hmm.
And the running backs are 12 million a year in 2017, and they've actually gone down to almost 10 million a year. And for that same rate, wide receivers are like 14.5 million, 14.6 million in 2016, and about 19.7 million.
Hmm.
What do you think about those numbers? To me, it just signals to like how much of a premium they're placing on the aerial attack and how the primary receiver and the quarterback such like you must have
Hmm.
them versus the running backs.
Well, I mean, like it is the technical strategy of the NFL today is that passing game. I mean, if you look at all the previous Super Bowl winners, um, hardly any money is in that running back room, and so I feel like outside of a few teams, there's like there like it's easier I think to build that air game strategy just with like how I guess deep the league is in terms of wide receiver talent, and so when it's like a valid strategy to invest in a quarterback and a star receiving talent. And you've seen all these other teams basically win or make it to a Super Bowl through this strategy, then it's hard to justify, spending $10+ million on a running back when we haven't seen a running back with that type of pay win a Super Bowl like recently at all.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Just look at the Chiefs. Isaiah Pacheco. When they get him, seventh round.
Hmm.
That should tell you all they need to do. And he
Hmm.
beat out their first round pick, Clyde Edwards-Helaire. So
Hmm.
if the Chiefs were in the like in a fickle and trying to re-sign Clyde Edwards-Helaire because he was really good, either
Hmm.
way they don't have to because of what Pacheco did. So
Yeah.
I hear you. It's it's a very difficult proposition right now to try and pay running backs to what they actually bring in value
Hmm.
to the market, just because there's so many good ones. And
Hmm.
like compared to like wide receivers, a franchise tag is almost like double like in 2023. But there's a clear difference between like a Gabriel Davis and a Stephon Diggs. Like that's like, and you'll see this around. That's just one example. We keep bringing up
Hmm.
Gabe Davis and Stephon Diggs, but they're like clear. There's a clear tier where there's like 10 to 15 elite wide receivers, and then like 80 are like nowhere as gifted technically. Whereas like for the running backs, there's like 25 to 30 that are really good technically, and then there's like 25 to 30 more that are rookies that just need an opportunity to do so. And there's just an injury waiting to happen. That's the difference. It's not
Hmm.
that like second tier of like 30 running backs that are like there's a clear drop off. There's some like that, but not all running backs.
Yeah, and then I mean, you additionally look at how many receivers you're putting on the field at a time versus how many running backs you have a field at a time. Where
Exactly. Yeah.
there are like you said you're like 20 to 25 like really good running backs, and then like another 20 to 25 kind of just a tier below that, and like you kind of think of like compare that to the receivers where that second tier of receivers are seeing the field for quite a lot of time, whereas that second tier running back where that could theoretically start on teams and put up reputable numbers don't ever have to see the field because all those spots are taken by that top 20 to 25 backs, and then you can argue like some of these older backs that are within that top 20 to 25 aren't getting those contracts because you know the second half of that 20 to 25 group is able to put up similar numbers to that initial group, and so it curates this weird imbalance of there's too many running backs for the I guess playtime available, and because if your running back's not going to play, getting like the average 20 touches a game or 20 carries a game, then it's like, how much are you willing to pay for that type of player? And obviously, it's important to have backups, but backups that don't see the field, it's hard to justify because I mean, you look at the contrast with quarterbacks as well, where a starting quarterback, yeah, can make upwards of 30 to 40+ million dollars a year, whereas you look at backup quarterbacks and it's like there's sure some backup quarterbacks that could theoretically start in the NFL, but the pay drop is super low there. And so if you compare it to that extent, it's like you're getting almost similar play times between that quarterback and I guess a 3 down back. And so how do you justify paying the next tier running backs as much when you see backups that also don't see the field as much not get anywhere near as close to those starting quarterbacks?
Yeah. It's interesting because like again, not all teams are going for the bell cow
Mm-hmm.
back anymore. There's like a very few teams that are doing it. But like
Mm-hmm.
most of the league now is also like having like a quartet or like trio of running backs that they
Mm-hmm.
can lean on. Where it's like running back by committee. And some backs don't get the carries to like get that like 100, 150 yards a game type of output that they could produce. And for good reason. Like they get hurt more consistently, especially if one relies on like cutting ability and like shifting weight more so than like power or like technical refinement. So it's very difficult to try and like justify why they should be like close to the wide receivers. But the way they're used, like the Christian McCaffrey, Austin Eckler's, like Nick Chubb's of the world, they're carry equal value of wide receivers. So I'll be really interested to see how how deals are structured for Tony
Mm-hmm.
Pollard's going forward, or like Josh Jacobs, because
Mm-hmm.
I don't blame Josh Jacobs for trying to sit out the whole season.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, like previous running backs definitely have hurt the market. You look at Le'Veon Bell. I think kind of kickstarted Le'Veon Bell and Melvin Gordon. I think kickstarted the whole running back market crash. And then you follow that up with, I mean, like Dalvin Cook's like technically been a Pro Bowl, 1,000 yard player for the past couple of years, but we've definitely seen him regress like for the past 2 to 3 years comparative to how he was at the start of his career, which not so fun when he's still only 28 years old. You see the same thing with Ezekiel Elliott, where he's paid a monster contract, but he's not living up to that compared to again running backs in the league. You have like guys like the Chiefs, Isaiah Pacheco, who is literally on like one of the smallest contracts you could possibly pay a player in the league, putting up arguably just as good, if not better, numbers than a guy who's getting paid like I don't even remember what his contract was, but I know it's over $10 million, and so it's like players like that, and I think even like you could technically fit Leonard Fournette in there of just guys that are paid a bunch, but or looking to get paid a bunch, but then don't, I guess, produce results, end up just hurting everybody else. Which I mean, I understand because they're trying to get the bag too, and just like all these other running backs, but uh, them in particular, I think hurt it just because I feel like you look before then and you see running backs are getting paid. Their pays are going up, and you see running backs getting that second contract. Maybe not as high as comparison to maybe the receivers or quarterbacks at that time, but um, there's certainly a couple players that directly led to this running back market crash.
Yeah, yeah, and Ezekiel signed for 6 years, like 90 million before the Cowboys
Hmm.
decided to get rid of him. So like that's $15 million a year. That's like what the wide receivers were making about 6 years ago. So that's like it was structured that way where like elite
Hmm.
running backs were like with the elite wide receiver tiers, like that you want a franchise tag.
Hmm.
Um, it's gotten to the point where I think the best way for running backs to get money above the franchise tag at this rate, like the 13, 14 million range, just to
Hmm.
start out, you have to be like a Christian McCaffrey. If like you're Gibbs, Jameer Gibbs, sorry,
Hmm.
you want to make sure like for the 3 years or 4 years that you're playing that you're healthy and you're playing like Christian McCaffrey. That's what
Hmm.
it comes down to. Otherwise, the lines are pretty much not keeping
Hmm.
because you got to prove to them now you're like Amon-Ra St. Brown and David Montgomery as value in that
Hmm.
position for them to justify
Yeah.
paying you equivalent to elite wide receiver. It's crazy.
Hmm. Yeah, but it's it's tricky, and like running backs are just a super easy to replace position, which makes it really hard. And I mean, like, I don't blame people for wanting to play running back. It's a fun, flashy position, but uh, honestly, I don't really know how they'll fix it. I mean, if like Saquon ended up signing, a 1 year deal, and then we'll kind of see how other players follow suit in terms of are they able to get longer contracts. Like, we'll see how much that Zoom call helps them out. But um, I guess next up we can just kind of go into the NFL division, NFC North. There's some running back changes here we've already talked about. David Montgomery, Jameer Gibbs, Donta Foreman, and so we'll start off with the Chicago Bears. And I know
Woot woot,
obviously
let's go.
you're pretty excited about the Bears, right? But yeah, to start off, we can just kind of go into their record, and you can kind of just share what your thoughts on how their season will go this year.
Yes, I do have them at 11-6. Do I regret it? No. It looks like you have a more reasonable record at 9-8, but
uh,
I think this is a team with the addition of DJ Moore and Darnell Wright, then adding that to Claypool, who's already been in the system, and he's going to serve as a number 3 behind Darnell Mooney. And then they just extended Komet, who's been in the system long enough, been with Fields for at least 2 years. And adding a lot of depth in the tight end and running back room as well as offensive line. I think those are huge additions that will all benefit the passing game. And I know their weakness right now is defensive end, and they're looking at Yannick Ngakwe and other guys. But I really like their schedule compared to last year a lot, which is why I have them winning 11 games. I think they're equally on par with the Saints at the very least. They can always split one against the Vikings. I think they can. I have them splitting against the Packers, but I think they can beat the Packers twice this year. I hope they can beat the Packers twice this year, rather. Obviously, we disagree on week 4, but for the most part, I'm keeping my expectations like they can easily hit a wild card spot this year, if not win the division. Because yes, the Detroit Lions are surging, and the Vikings just came off a 12-win season. But if you look at a lot of the Vikings wins and look at the state of the Bears roster, I think the Bears have improved by miles just from the roster additions alone, and they're in a state where they can win most of these games. I kind of kept them at their ceiling, I know, but they could easily lose to the Browns, the Saints, um, even the Vikings twice, and then even the Broncos. So like I could easily see them at like 9-8 or even like a 7-win season. And compared to where they were being at the bottom of the NFL, saved by Lovie Smith and getting the number 1 pick, like I think this is an improvement if they hit like 7 to 8 wins. Honestly,
well, I mean, like, not getting last in the league will be an improvement for the Bears this year. But um, yeah, it's like, I mean, you have to think that like a decent chunk of this team from last season that was quite literally maybe the worst team in the league. I mean, record wise, yes, but like skill talent wise, maybe not. But like they were not a good team last season, and like I think that while they did add a lot of good pieces in this offseason, and I really like what they did this offseason, it'll be, I think, hard for everything to connect in year 1 of this, I guess, stage of the rebuild. I think like the past couple years they've been, I mean, I guess technically you'd say for forever they've been rebuilding. but
damn,
but,
that's
but I
crazy.
feel like the Justin Fields era has been like the next, I guess, a new rebuild era for the Bears. And they finally have like a formidable team surrounding him, and I think that they'll certainly improve from last season. And will I even think my record's maybe a little high for them, just because I do think that there will be a lot of growing pains with this team in terms of a lot of young talent, a lot of new
Fair.
talent on this team, and I feel like overall there's quite a lack of, I guess, veteran leadership type players that the Bears can rely on from the past couple seasons. That I mean that you may DJ Moore could develop into kind of a quote unquote veteran player for them, even though he's not super old yet. But I think there is just going to be a lot of growing pains this season. Next year, though, granted, I don't know what their schedule will be like, but I could imagine them, being one of these 11-6 type teams, especially if Justin Fields is able to take the next step in his career. But I guess we're just kind of talking about it. We can go into their depth chart right now. Just kind of talk about some of their acquisitions that they got. But yeah, so here is their offense, and talked plenty about these guys, obviously. But I guess what do you like on their roster right now, or on their offense at least?
Yeah, I like a lot of pieces. I like how they added focused on depth rather than like trying to go out with like the most salary cap space in the league and sign like the high price free agents. Like obviously they invested a lot in the linebacker spots, which we'll get to in a minute. But
Hmm.
the way they invested in guys like Robert Tunyon, Deontay Foreman, PJ Walker, um, they just recently signed Isaiah Ford. These aren't guys that are gonna like knock your socks off, but they're guys that can complement what you're trying to do in the passing game. They can do a lot of versatile things, and I think that's equally important on the off season when you're trying to establish rapport with your starters, but also
Hmm.
like develop like other threats. So like you can run two tight end sets with Komet and Tunyon. You can run three wide out with like more Claypool and Moody now, and there's a lot of potential with Tyler Scott. He's a speed threat, but he can be much more than that. Roshan Johnson, I think, can easily take the starting running back spot by mid-season's end or season's end. But if not, it's because Khalil Herbert's a beast and he's the actual starter on this team. I don't look at it as saying Foreman's the starter here, like it's mentioned on the depth chart. He's more of like your third down back, change of pace back, like goal line back. That they don't want Justin Fields running it in every time like a crazy person trying to buy time and then running it in. Yes, that worked a lot last season because that was their offense. The offensive line wasn't as good. Um, and offensive line, if you look at it, not a lot of big names. Like we tried to get McGlinchey, your Broncos got him,
Hmm.
but other than that, like the signings have been solid. So it's been like solid additions to add like solid depth, and I think that's a step up from what they had last year for sure.
Hmm. Yeah, it's a tricky team because like they have a lot of good players, but I do think that there are still quite a lot of question marks, and so like theoretically, none of this could mesh well together, and the Bears could theoretically be picking top five again up this upcoming season, which would obviously not be ideal for you. But Justin Fields, I think he is a good passer. We've seen this in college. We've seen him make elite, passing plays in his career in the NFL so far. But I think we need to see that on a consistent basis and see him like, I guess, be able to function within an offensive passing scheme that I guess put up good passing numbers this upcoming season for I think them to be successful. And like I do like I guess Foreman, Herbert, and Johnson as a committee. I do also think Johnson has a good shot at winning this room, but again, it's a lot of what ifs in this running back room of can Foreman be consistent all season? Is Herbert built well enough to be a lead guy the whole season? Is Roshan really going to be good? Was he really just stuck behind Bijan Robinson's shadow, or does he just suck? I mean, I don't think he sucks, but there's that. And then DJ Moore, um, yes, everyone's been saying that the reason why he hasn't broken out was because of quarterback play. But then if the quarterback play isn't good here, then it almost feels like why did you bring DJ Moore in if you're not really going to get much out of him with poor quarterback play? Mooney just kind of needs a rebound season. Claypool, stepping up in development, and so like I think Komet might be, I guess, their most like weird enough to say, their most stable like skill player that like could last. I mean, he obviously did get re-signed to a deal, but theoretically, Fields. Let's say he sucks this year just because he, for whatever reason, can't continue to get good in the NFL. Then all of a sudden, Bears may move on for the quarterback position. Um, I wouldn't be surprised if the Bears take running back second round next season. Um, DJ Moore and Claypool could not mesh well with Justin Fields, and all of a sudden it's Kmet season again, where he played really good last season. I really like him. I think when he first got drafted, I was like, oh, that's kind of a dumb pick, but he's played really good for the Bears. He's low key been one of the better tight ends in the NFL. I think he's easily at the very top of that tier 3 group of tight ends, or like the very bottom of that second tier of those tight ends, which is a really nice spot to be. My tier 1 is like Kelsey, Andrews, Kittle. Uh, Maybe I'm missing one more guy in there, but then you follow that up with guys like Pitts, Waller, Hawkinson, Goddard, and then I feel like I'm missing one more guy maybe, but then right under that I do have Komet in like the top of that next bunch, which is a pretty good spot to be in my opinion. Like I feel like it's pretty. I can comfortably say those other guys are probably better than Komet, but behind him, I feel like there's quite a lot of guys that wish they could be at Komet's level. And then I guess going into this offensive line, they have some good pieces. I think Cody Whitehair's probably the best offensive lineman on here. And again, it's just a lot of other question marks for this offensive line that you hope play well. I think Darnell Wright was a phenomenal pick in the draft. Tevin Jenkins, we'll see if he can continue progressing, and then we'll just see kind of how Nate Davis, Braxton Jones pans out. But it's my analysis. But I do like what you said about the Bears going after depth.
Yeah, and I purposely didn't mention DJ Moore because I've said this when they had the trade, like earlier when it happened on this podcast. I really think the way he wins and runs his routes, he has a technical refinement. He has the long speed. You hear training camp reports like Dunham Mooney saying he can see the speed in DJ Moore, and he's like renowned for his speed on the Bears, like from when he first got drafted. So for him to say that, it's like really valuable. But like this is a number 1 wide receiver that I really think was overshadowed by quarterback play. And I think it's a type of move where like you see AJ Brown go to Jalen Hurts. You see the Bengals invest in Jamar Chase. You see the Dolphins invest in Jalen Waddle. Like you see these types of picks, and you see like Patrick Mahomes. He was drafted in a system crafted by Andy Reid and already had Travis Kelce and Tyreek Hill to begin his development with. And I'm just saying, like the Bears got DJ Moore for a reason because like he's the guy that can win against one-on-one coverage on this team. He's the guy that's going to demand the attention. He's going to free up like Claypool and Mooney to shine where they shine best, and they're not asked to win versus man coverage. I think that was the biggest difference in why like Justin Fields had to run so much, and that was pretty much their offense. Now, like even if the offensive line was the same as last year, which was okay in spots but terrible in others, like Justin Fields has a quick read now in DJ Moore. He didn't have that, and I think that's going to make a huge difference for this team. I actually really like Jenkins, Whitehair, and Wright. I think they're the best. Like I think 4 of their picks are really good. Like they just need like Jenkins and Wright need to develop, but I think they're going to have good seasons. Braxton Jones improved over his rookie season. Like he wasn't expected to be a left tackle starter, and they got him in the 5th round last year. He got beat in spots within the first 8 weeks, but next 8 weeks he was phenomenal. And I think that was a part of why they had the best run game in the league last year. So I think they just need a compliment off of that, and Justin Fields needs to prove that he made strides in that area. But the one question mark I would have is Nate Davis. Because he's a really good run blocker, but how does he fare against the pass? When you're going against guys like Aiden Hutchinson or Kenny Clark in that division, that's probably my question on this team. Everything else, I think, yes, this is a whole different offense compared to what he had a year
ago. Yeah, and like this team has a ton of potential. I think this is certainly one of the up and coming teams in the NFL. Especially, I feel like the NFC in general is kind of just a little bit in shambles right now. With there's like, a, I mean, I guess I can feel like I can say the Eagles are a clear favorite right now, followed by maybe not Cardinals. They're awful. The Seahawks and the 49ers, maybe the Vikings, Cowboys. But like I feel like a lot of those teams are already quite a tier down from the Eagles, and I think the Bears easily have, I guess, the offense in the works right now to, in the future, maybe probably not this year, but in the future, be a competitive team that is seen like the Eagles are seen right now in terms of just being a complete team, especially just if everybody, develops the way they do or the way they need to. Plus, they, hit on the next couple of free agencies and then they hit on the next couple of drafts. But I guess we can just kind of go over their defense now. I know you're kind of hyped about their defense, and so this is their defense, right? Yep, this is.
Yeah, it's kind of formatted a little bit like the mix of the Bengals defense, if you will. A lot of guys like are not like gonna knock your socks off. You got like a star like in Jalen Johnson, obviously, and Eddie Jackson for
Mm-hmm.
sure. Like they're gonna be the headliners on this team. But you see a lot of like good players, but not like we got a game plan for that guy outside of those two.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah.
but I really love what they have, well, what they brought in with Jaquan Brisker. I thought that was a phenomenal pick. I think
Mm-hmm.
Tyreek Stevenson rather, and Kyler Gordon were phenomenal draft picks over the past two draft classes. Like their cornerback depth is solid. It's solidified.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the linebackers they brought in, they were heavy investments, but their investments they have like the potential to be elite linebackers when they develop. Like they're young enough
Mm-hmm.
where they're in their primes in that earning age where they're going to be fine. And you could already see
Mm-hmm.
Tremaine Edmonds like taking a leadership role in camp, which is what you want to see. And it will allow them to play that cover two and like the cover three zones a lot more effectively in getting depth.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Jack Sanborn was a revelation last year. Like he made losing Roquan Smith not that bad, and for an
Mm-hmm.
undrafted free agent coming in and making that trade not that bad for the Bears, I will take that because of the
Mm-hmm.
contract difference, and it allows you to pay these two linebackers like slightly more than Roquan Smith rather than invest in one big
Mm-hmm.
contract like Roquan Smith, no matter how talented he is. And I think I already mentioned Yannick Ngakwe. I think they need a guy like that to solidify this defense because Travis Gibson has been developing well. Like Dominique Robinson was a good get in the draft last year, and then DeMarcus Walker was a good free agency ad. Um, but this defensive line is probably the weak link on this team because they're
Mm-hmm.
good, but they're not like we're not going to double team one guy
Mm-hmm.
out of this uh, rotation of four.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's not like that. It's just like, oh, if the Bears want to go cover two, we don't have to worry about the pass rush as
Mm-hmm.
much as we have to worry about the coverage.
Yeah, and I agree with a lot of what you said there. I think, in all honesty, right in this current state, I do think the Bears' defensive line is dangerously below average. Not to say that guys can, progress. They did draft two defensive tackles during this most recent draft,
Pickens and
and
Dexter, yep.
yeah, and so you can, I guess, if they develop well, then all of a sudden you have two staples at your defensive tackle position, and I think the Bears noticed, I guess, a weakness in their defensive line, and so that's why they went there. I think Demarcus Walker's okay at best. He's had one decent year, which was last season in his like what 6 7 year career so far, and I think you know you'd hope that at minimum, I think the Bears hope that. I mean, even at best, I think that he gave 7 sacks to the Bears this upcoming season. That'd be a huge benefit to them. He's like I straight up wasn't Jaquan Brisker like their leading like their sack leader last season. I'm like 99% sure that their starting strong safety led the Bears in sacks last year, which is quite abysmal. And it's like, how,
Yeah. Yeah. If you have one more than Travis Gibson, one more than Justin Jones, one and a
right?
half
And
more than
so,
Roquan Smith. Yeah.
yeah, and
That's
so
that
it's
kind of
like,
doesn't look good.
I mean, he's a phenomenal player, and like, good on him. He's a great pick. He came like I wasn't really like keen in on him at the beginning, but he really did come out of nowhere. I know I saw him like in preseason a little bit, and I was like, dang, he's actually kind of good. And then throughout the season, I was like, dang, he really is kind of good. And I think the Bears really need their defensive line to step up if they want to stay in games because their secondary is phenomenal. I love their linebacker group, um, but it's hard to make it, I guess, a valuable unit if you literally can't apply pressure onto the quarterback. And I don't know the stats of these their pass rushers, pressure rates per se, but um, I mean, sacks are a huge part of the games. If you're not getting sacks, you're kind of losing games, and so uh, somebody here needs to step up. Like you said, if they get I guess a veteran here or just someone that's slightly better onto this defensive line as a pass rusher or like as an edge position, I guess. I think that's what the Bears really need in order to win games. And I mean, I think that's what makes this Bears team tricky is they can't really rely on, at least in this current state, I don't think they can really rely on either their offense or their defense to keep them completely in games. Whereas I feel like I look at the Patriots and I'm like, the offense has a handful of weak points, but like I can trust that defense to at least keep them in games where like I feel like if the defense or the offense come out pretty weak on this team, like the other position group can play well, but I don't think it's well enough to keep them in games, is which my major concern is with this team.
And yet, despite that, they had a worse roster last year.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look at a lot of their games that they were losing towards like the final eight, they were in a lot of them. Like they were
Mm-hmm.
like they hit it off with the Eagles for like solid 3 quarters. The
Mm-hmm.
Packers for solid 3 quarters. Lions, it was nip and tuck. Like the Miami Dolphins when they were hot, like that was like a shootout. Their defense kept them in games at points. And for an offense run by Justin Fields and like the running offense, all you want with this defense is to get like 3 or 4 stops and then trust the offense. Granted, like the offense has potential, has a lot of potential, and then this defense also has a lot of potential. Where like Justin
Mm-hmm.
Jones has been like the best player on the defensive line, like he's
Mm-hmm.
been solid. But I agree with you. There needs to be like a force multiplier on their D
Mm-hmm.
line. Maybe someone like Khalil Mack that might have helped this defense a little
Yeah,
bit.
maybe. Yeah, or if they had a guy like, well, what's his face, Leonard Floyd, or just kind of like a middling pass rusher that could,
Well,
add some
there you
bonus
go.
pressure here.
Yeah, if only the Bears had them.
Yeah, imagine a duo like that, Khalil Mack and Leonard Floyd on this team right now. Like,
But I will say this GM has done a good job, like not
hmm
overpaying on resources. I think that was the problem with Pace. Like he had a lot of fantastic like talent picks, but Pace would overpay and like overexpend
hmm
resources where you can't like build any depth, like say if they get hurt
hmm
or like fill out the rest of your roster. And I think Ryan Poles has done a phenomenal job filling out the rest of his roster. Like
hmm
this is Matt Eberflus like specialty on defense,
hmm
and I think he's a great coach from what I've seen this first season. The record doesn't show that, but I think with more talent, you'll see this team like pull out and outlast a lot of teams with discipline and just the depth. That thing that would really come to fruition in this team, and I could definitely see a 4 or 5 win improvement at minimum.
hmm Yeah, and I mean, just looking to future seasons, I mean, like next year directly, the Bears do have two first round picks, right? Because they got the normal one plus I think the Panthers one. Then they
The one
got a
from
second,
Carolina.
yeah, the one from the Panthers. They got the second round, the third round, and then I do believe they have two fourth round picks as well. And so they have quite right. Maybe I'm not sure, but yeah. So they have a decent amount of picks going into the future draft as well. And so I think again, maybe not this year, but next year they'll have a lot of really good pieces on this team. To help them be competitive in games. Especially because, like I guess in our record predictions, I don't think we had the Panthers necessarily doing super hot, and so theoretically, if the Bears have a top 10 pick from Carolina, and then whatever other first round pick they have, that's really nice value to have just from trading back from the number one overall this last season.
Yeah, and then plus, if I'm like if we're completely wrong on Justin Fields
Mhm.
and he just cannot like find the passing game that he showed at Ohio State and in
Mhm.
parts last year, and it turns for the worst, you have two first round picks to go up and get a quality quarterback if you can't
Mhm.
get Drake May or Caleb
Mhm.
Williams and invest in that position. Or do I say invest in another weapon if the weapons aren't good enough? Or
Mhm.
buffer this pass rush, if, even when Yannick Ngakwe and like some other signing with Daniil Hunter. Because
Mhm.
a guy like that, if that's not enough, you got like assets to get an edge rusher, quarterback, wide receiver now. And I
Mhm.
think for the longest time you couldn't say that about the Bears because they would always trade their first round pick or their second round pick to try and get a Khalil Mack. So
Mhm.
I think just from a resource management standpoint, this team has done a phenomenal job building out the depth. And just
Mhm.
through organic improvement and addition DJ Moore, I think you can chalk up 4 or 5 more wins to what they've
Yeah. Um. Yeah, I don't really have much left to add. I mean, the special teams is nice, nothing crazy, but it's a solid unit. But I think I can say we can go on to the Detroit Lions next. Um, they are a exciting team. I am excited for their future. I love their coaching system, but um, here we have their record for or record predictions for the upcoming season, and we were kind of similar on this, at least for the final records. But how do you think that I guess the Lions will do this year?
had. I'm super excited for them as well. Brad Holmes has done a phenomenal job like building out this team, and credit to them. They trusted Jared Goff. He delivered for them. He improved. They built out like quality system of resources both on offense and defense, especially from the wide receiver position. Invested
Mm-hmm.
heavily in quarterbacks. You hope CJ Gardner Johnson's okay.
Mm-hmm.
But as far as this team, like this is the one team I'm confident is going to have a winning record out of anybody in this
Mm-hmm.
division.
Yeah.
Um, I like I think the Bears have the potential to have a winning record, but the Lions, like it's almost like that's their floor. Like their floor is a
Mm-hmm.
winning record, like 9-8. I think we have them slightly above that.
Mm-hmm.
I think that their schedule is a lot favorable. Where like week 3, 5, 6, and 8, you're confident they're gonna win. You couldn't say that about
Mm-hmm.
the Lions a couple of years back when they first started like building
Mm-hmm.
this team out. So credit to Brad Holmes, credit to Dan Campbell. They've done a phenomenal job building this program, and
Mm-hmm.
they're a playoff contender for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because, I mean, I'm just looking at the Lions' previous records, and I'm just looking back at 2019 right now. They were 3-12-1. Then in 2020 they went 5-11, and then 2021 they went 3-13-1, and then last year they ended up going 9-8, getting second place in the division, which it's a pretty nice jump to have. It's the jump Bears fans want, right? Going to
Exactly, hundred
second
percent.
place, from worst place in the league to second in their own division, maybe making that playoff wild card spot. But um, yeah, I think I really love the culture that this team has, and I think that's what I've kind of been saying, I guess, throughout a lot of this is, the culture, I guess, which was brought by their head coach, was a huge factor into their success because even the year before, when they had that losing record, I feel like everybody was still bought into their head coach's like culture that he was trying to create for this team, and we really saw that culture that he created flourish last season with this 9-8 record. The Lions had arguably one of the best offenses in the league last year, and um, they have a handful of key defensive players that I think they're hoping, and they even brought in a handful of guys. But I think just the additions on defense, plus you know keeping the rhythm going with this offense, can easily lead them to another winning record and potentially winning this division.
Yeah, I agree. Not much to add here. I think they could easily. I know you had them splitting like most of their division games,
Hmm.
but I think they could easily go 4-2 or 5-1 in the division, depending on
Hmm.
how Jordan Love shakes out, how the Vikings shake out.
Hmm.
We don't know about, and like how the Bears shake out as well. So
Hmm.
the this is like the team I would be most confident in actually
Hmm.
winning the division real talk.
Hmm.
As much as I want the Bears to win it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I do have most of this division being relatively close in records. And so I think that this division theoretically could be anybody's game, but I do see the Lions as probably one of the favorites. But because you can go more into depth on that with their uh, depth chart right now, and you have this, the the best quarterback himself, Jared Goofball Goff, to lead them to victory. But I guess what do you like on this offense?
I like the depth of receiver. Like
Hmm.
this is a receiving room I want to have. Like this is like an
Hmm.
amazing receiving room I want to have. I also low key like their running back depth, like beyond David Montgomery and Jameer Gibbs too. Craig
Hmm.
Reynolds is a contributor. Justin Jackson should be a starter in this league. He's just buried on the depth chart for whatever reason. It's always been that way. Like I think the Chargers didn't miss a beat when he was back, like backing Austin Eckler on that team, and he could be a starter in this league. Like when we were talking about the running back room, this is what I mean. Like there's always guys like that. You'll notice like Kareem Hunt still doesn't have a job, but he could be a starter in this league.
Hmm.
That like Justin Jackson's a guy like that. So I would
Hmm.
like if all goes wrong, where like Swift is missing time, and then
Hmm.
Jamal Williams has to come in, and for some reason Jamal Williams can't play, Justin Jackson can step in for sure. Like that was the case last year. Like
Hmm.
this year, it's kind of the same case. Like you would hope like a new cast of running backs, well, is good. And I think
Hmm.
one value play, if I were to have a fantasy, is David Montgomery.
Hmm.
I think he's easily 1,000 yard rusher in this offense, despite the presence of Jameer Gibbs. But I think they'll use Jameer Gibbs more like Alvin Kamara in the passing game, but not as much as a runner. He can
Hmm.
do it, and he's better than Swift in doing it. But I think David Montgomery is just like he can also do the same thing. He's just not
Hmm.
as um, how do you say this? He's not as elusive as Jameer Gibbs.
Hmm.
He's elusive in the different sense where like he'll like tackle break and like use power, whereas Jameer Gibbs has elusiveness. Um, but I love Amon-Ra St. Brown.
Hmm.
When Jameson Williams come back, I think is going to make a huge difference for this offense. I love Denzel
Hmm.
Mims on this team and Marvin Jones. It's going to bring them a vertical threat. And I also love Sam Laporta. I think he's like a sleeper. If like I can't get, there's probably three tight ends I'm targeting right now. That's like
Hmm.
Kelsey in the first round. If he slips past five, I'm grabbing him. Um, then it's Kittle for sure, and then probably the other one would be either Goddard or Hawkinson. Well, probably more Goddard for the value. But if I can't get any of these three guys, I'm like keeping Laporta as a sleeper because I easily think in this offense he could have 5 touchdowns, 500 yards, like
Hmm.
50 catches. I think that's reasonable within his outcome, like in this offense. And for a rookie at that pick, like I would take that. I would love that.
Hmm.
But I don't think any surrounding cast is better than the offensive line. I think the offensive line is the best part about this team. They invested heavily in this group,
Hmm.
and it shows off. They have great starters, great depth. I would not be surprised if this is a top five offense in the league again
Hmm.
next year.
Yeah, I think this is filled with really good talent. Obviously, Williams isn't going to be playing for part of this upcoming season because of gambling rules. But besides that, I do think that they have, like you said, they have good depth in this wide receiver room that I think can help overcome um, Williams for now. But I do, Marvin Jones, I think he's a good player. I know you're in love with Denzel Mims. You always talk about him. It'll be interesting to see how he is. But yeah, like I feel like it's hard to add on, I guess, more to what you said. I mean, their offensive line is really, really good. I feel like not a lot of people talk about how great this offensive line is. I think like Pro Football Focus ranked this group as like a top five unit in the NFL, which I feel like Pro Football Focus, it's their rankings as a whole are kind of spotty, but I feel like their offensive line rankings is typically pretty good, and just seeing that they have this group as the top five unit, I think is not talked about enough, and I think that'll lead this team to a lot of success. um, I don't know how David Montgomery will do this upcoming season though. I think like people are expecting it's a really tricky situation because like yes he's good, but like we've seen a lot of running backs that get like drafted overtake like a veteran, a technical like player that's done good already. And I mean, like I guess the clear cut example of this is the Jaguars when they had James Robinson, they drafted Travis Etienne, and I mean Etienne's been phenomenal, and I'd probably take him over Robinson, but there's like the question marks of why would you take a running back in the first round when you have Robinson who's ran for what like two back-to-back thousand years maybe, or he was really good for 2 years basically, and I feel like we kind of saw that last year with Montgomery where I guess he did play good, but you kind of just see him kind of nonchalantly phased out, even with only knowing that Khalil Herbert is in that running back room. And I feel like you look at Brees Hall and Michael Carter, where Michael Carter, he played pretty good football his rookie year, but then they go ahead and they draft Brees Hall, and he kind of just takes over the room. You look at Tyler Algier, where he has, averaging over 5 yards a carry and gets 1,000 rush yards on the season. And then, I mean, the Falcons draft Bijan Robinson. I mean, Bijan's Bijan, but it's the same premise of people expect, I think, these older running backs that have, I guess, success in the past to put up elite numbers, but there's a reason why they took these young guys so high, and I think people keep on getting surprised, and I guess, yeah, unexpectedly surprised that these younger players end up getting a heavier workload and kind of taking away from maybe some of the expected touches that some of these veterans may have.
That's a fair point. But I'll also say, like, it's probably not the Lions that you want to make that analogy to, only because of what you saw from last season when like how they structured their offense under Ben Johnson. Jamal Williams had 17 touchdowns in this offense. 17. So that leads me to tell you that like they want a guy like what Jamal Williams can do in the red zone, especially because you're not expecting Jared Goff to run for like 12 touchdowns like Justin Fields. So like the touchdowns on the ground have to come from somewhere, right? And I think Jahmyr Gibbs is like a better player between the 20s. He's more effectively used that way. He can run inside the tackles a lot better than Swift. So he's going to get some touchdowns for sure. But I think that's more around the range of like 7 to 8 or 8 to 9. Whereas like Swift had like 5 touchdowns last week. And like even if David Montgomery has like 9 to 10 touchdowns, like for fantasy production, that's great. And even if he doesn't hit 100 yards, if he hits like 800 yards running and then like 8 to 10 touchdowns, I think you're happy with that. Like as a depth piece that's coming in like the 5th or 6th round compared to like a lot of like starters in the league. I hear you, but I also think the running backs being drafted depend like what their actual talent and skill level is. Because like Brees Hall and like Bijan Robinson, those are like 2 of the most electrifying backs in the league that can win from anywhere, essentially. So like I don't fault the Jets and the Falcons for taking them given their backfield situation. And then when you look at around the league, a lot of teams are using 2 or 3 backs in their offense. They're not going to the spell cow kind of system. They want to have like 2 or 3 backs where like I was like trying to play fantasy or like I was trying to decipher who's going to lead this backfield. It's going to be a little bit confusing. Is it Gibbs? Is it Montgomery? But for the teams, it's like, thank goodness we have both. So we have plan A, plan B. It's kind of that situation. Like, how do we use these guys? So I think it's a kind of a good problem to have for this Lions team. But this is the one offense I'd be confident where like Gibbs is going to be utilized well. Montgomery's going to be utilized well, just as equally as St. Brown and like Laporta and like Jameson Williams are going to be utilized well.
Yeah. And I mean, I guess the other contrary is Gibbs was drafted in the first round, and like you don't draft a running back in the first round just to limit his touches and like try to make a 50-50 backfield with a running back you signed from free agents. Granted, he is a good running back, but I think he can have a lot of rushing yards. He can have a lot of touchdowns, but I wouldn't be surprised if a handful of his rushing yards is quite limited due to the fact that the Lions really want to feature Jahmyr Gibbs in this offense. And it's strictly due to draft capital of we drafted this guy in the first round. We're going to completely take advantage of our first round talent guy. And so, I mean, I feel like Brees Hall, he played phenomenal, but I feel like he was talked nowhere near as close as to like how people were envisioning, Bijan Robinson, and like Paul was the best talked about running back in his class, but he still was considered not good compared to years prior and years after in terms of just a running back in general, which I think it's easy to have that recency bias of saying, well, he played really good last year, and so of course, like they would play him over Michael Carter. But at the beginning, I feel like a lot of people expected, oh, it's probably going to be a split between Michael Carter and Brees Hall because Michael Carter played good last year, and like, what more can you expect? And then we saw Brees Hall just kind of play really, really good, and you're like, well, why do we need Michael Carter now? Because Brees Hall's really, really good. But
The other argument to that is CEH, like when he was drafted, and then you already had Damian Williams like go off in the Super Bowl in this role. Then you're like, why do we need Clyde Edwards-Helaire? But people thought went on that same timeline, and they're like, okay, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, we're picking him in the first round. He's in the Chiefs offense. He's going to thrive off of Hill, Kelsey, and Mahomes. And I think it's really dependent on the player's ability. I think obviously like we both think Bijan Robinson's better than Brees Hall, but it's like those comparisons are not that far off versus like CEH and Saquon Barkley or CEH like guys that are taken high in the first round and then what their talent and skill level really is. We had a lot of hope for CEH. It didn't pan out. Partially due to his fault, partially due to how he was used. But I would just say just because Gibbs is taken in the first round doesn't mean that Montgomery's going away. I think both are going to be valuable. I was high on Gibbs. I have a number 2 in this draft class. But I could see a situation where like both of them have 700 yards or 800 yards. Like even though the distribution is like not 50-50.
Yeah. I mean, I guess the one argument against Clyde Edwards-Helaire is he was taken literally at the last spot of the first round compared to where Gibbs was in the first round. Because I mean, you could argue like you could look at it and see like Will Levis was around that same range of pick as Clyde Edwards-Helaire was, but you're not comparing him to a quarterback that was drafted top 10, right? Like
it's also the running back market too. It goes back to the running back market.
Yeah.
Too. Like how much of money do we really want to take a running back in the first round when we could just get an Elijah Mitchell in the 6th round or Isaiah Pacheco in the 7th round? So I think there's a lot of moving variables. If it's like a game changing running back, like where the organization's like, we gotta take Bijan top 10, then they're gonna pick Bijan top 10.
Yeah.
And versus like Clyde Edwards-Helaire, where it's like we think like he's could be a really good fit in this offense compared to what we already have with Hill and Kelsey. We don't want to lose him in the 3rd round, 4th round, 2nd round. So you might as well take him at the end of the 1st. Though there's like definite conversations to be had there. And then don't forget, Ezekiel Elliott was also taken in the top 10 too, and he had a couple quality seasons, but obviously last season he dropped off. I think he still has talent, but it's always a complicated conversation with these running backs because you want to take them in the 1st round and early in the 1st round for like year 2, year 3 as you have them. You sort of have these questions because whether it's like injury concerns, how does the effect of the injuries play on the running back? And then also like what's our backup plan if he gets hurt and then not having one? This led to this simulation where like, okay, we might as well have like a free agency pickup running back who's proven himself and a draft pick.
Yeah. I mean, Zeke was like literally the best running back in the league for like 5 years. So I feel like it's worth it was definitely easily worth that 1st round pick for the Cowboys. But yeah, obviously he's not as good now, but I do think that the Cowboys do not regret that 1st round pick with Ezekiel Elliott in terms of the fact that he was literally the best running back for like half a decade.
I agree. I think they regret the money they invested in him.
Well, yeah, easily,
but we'll see. We hope for the best for Gibbs, but my opinion is I would try and grab either Gibbs or Montgomery and be happy with it. Like if you have either of these guys on your teams, good, because it's a good offense to invest in. Invest in good offenses. Don't invest in like the draft capital is probably the mantra. I'm trying to take it.
Yeah. But yeah, anyways, I guess we can go on to their defense now. Again, their offense is phenomenal. Yeah. I feel like we could just go forever about the debate of running backs, and how well they'll do, especially with how stupid this market is right now for running backs. But obviously, defense is important for this team. They have a lot of really good players on this defense, which it's partly the reason why this is potentially one of the best teams in the NFC. But yeah, what do you think? I guess about some of their key pieces and whatnot.
I know I like the Bears cornerback depth a little bit, but I think the Lions are right up there, honestly. They have a lot more veterans like Sutton, Mosley, and Gardner Johnson that are proven. Um, I would have liked them to keep Akuda and to still keep that chance on him, but I don't mind these replacement options. I think they're great.
Hmm.
Kirby Joseph, Tracy Walker, um, Anzalone, like they're not going to knock your socks off. But again, solid options. Solid options. Jack Campbell, we are hiring him on the draft. Aiden Hutchinson's gonna be
Hmm.
one of those defensive ends that's talked about like with the elites very soon. James Houston had a breakout season last year. The rest of the roster is like solid options. Like I don't
Hmm.
know too much about Bugs and McNeil, but I think this defense already is like a lot better upgraded because they focus on the secondary.
Hmm. Yeah, I really like Jack Campbell. I know people complain about his like draft position, but I feel like if I look at this draft as a whole, like without I guess seeing where players are picked, I would say that this is easily one of the best drafts that one of the best draft classes, at least from what we know so far. But like they have a lot of good players. They drafted basically positions of need, and they drafted where they felt they were good. Again, I really like what you said about their secondary. I think it has really good depth. You got a good player in Brian Branch, and he's technically listed as a second string guy right now, which it's a pretty nice thing to have. And then you obviously you added Cam Sutton, you added Emmanuel Mosley, C.J. Gardner Johnson, and I mean, I guess you're hoping that they gel well and mesh well with this defensive system that they're being introduced to. Um, but again, I feel like defense was a significant weakness of this team last year, and we really saw that in the beginning of the season, where despite having an electric offense, their defense just couldn't keep them in games, and it resulted in a pretty rough start. But towards the end, we kind of saw their defense pick up some steam. Obviously, led by Alex Anzalone. I think he is a really underrated focal point of this offense. Aiden Hutchinson's obviously, a star talent, and I think that, again, this year I think they will be good, but next, with another offseason with a free agency and a new draft class, I think that this team will be really, really dangerous.
Agreed. Absolutely agreed. Yeah, this is a team that's just missing, I would say, like a three tech or like a defensive tackle that's just gonna
Hmm.
make it easier for Hutchinson to get one-on-one matchups. I would say I honestly love the linebackers they have. I wouldn't even
Hmm.
touch them because Rodriguez had some good moments too.
Hmm.
Um, I yeah, and if you can get a playmaking safety like if like Derwin James isn't like the contract for the Chargers, if I'm the Lions, I'd be calling about him despite what they have in the roster.
Hmm.
They've already invested in Brian Branch too, so they got some good depth as well.
Hmm.
Not as deep as the Bears on the defense, I would say, but I like their
Hmm.
starters where they're at, particularly in the front seven, slightly better than the Bears.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, I mean, I feel like the Bears have a really weak defensive line that holds them back.
Partially
Whereas, at
why.
least, yeah. Whereas, like, I feel like Aiden Hutchinson alone would like make the Bears' defense so much better. Just that, like, one singular player. Like, the Bears really are on defense, like an elite pass rusher away from like being a defense where you're like, okay, this is a reputable defense. Like it's that close, but because of that lack of pass rush presence, um, everything kind of just like trickles away, and I'm just like, oh, they're so close but so far. But um, it's a good team. Um, I like Brian Branch, but yeah, I did like what you said about Derwin James. I think that adding a guy like him to this defense would be pretty ridiculous, and it would obviously make me happy because he wouldn't be on the Chargers anymore, and then it would make my AFC West games a little bit more enjoyable to watch. But um, yeah, but no, I do think that yeah, next season for sure, barring a terrible Jared Goff regression, this team is easily a playoff contender. Can I don't know. It's like it's hard to like they're good. I think they're one of the better teams in the NFC. But then like I put them against the Eagles, and I'm like, well, I don't think I can see them beating the Eagles to make it to the Super Bowl. Like, like they're good, like I guess they could, any given Sunday, but um, it's just hard to see this team or literally any other team easily just like beat the Eagles and make it to the Super Bowl, which I guess is the biggest hindrance to literally every single team in the NFC, which is kind of crazy in my opinion.
I would agree with you, except for the 49ers or Seahawks. I think those two teams are like the two teams that could potentially
Hmm.
upseed them. But yeah, I think the one thing stopping the Lions is just they don't have like ridiculousness on defense.
Hmm. Yeah.
So like if you don't have that, then you got no chance against the. I think their
Hmm.
offense can keep up with the Eagles' offense. I don't
Hmm.
have any questions about that. I
Oh
think
yeah, for
Jared
sure.
Goff's proven himself to the stage where he can execute an offense.
Hmm.
He can still get got, like if you
Hmm.
got like ridiculous pass rush where like the offensive line breaks down. But
Hmm.
the Lions have built such a great roster from like the trenches on both
Hmm.
sides of the ball, and like for the key pieces on this defense now, where they surrounded Jared Goff with amazing pieces to work with. So
Hmm.
like he doesn't have to be a superhero, and I think
Yeah.
like they're like the prototypical team you want to have if you don't have a top 10 QB.
Hmm.
Beautifully done on the roster.
Hmm. Yeah, and like in theory, if they do suck again, this is a perfect offense or just a perfect team in general for a quarterback to step in that is a rookie. You could theoretically say if Hendon Hooker, if they think he's good enough, I think that I really like that draft pick from them, and I think that this could be one of those teams that could just be a nice quarterback system. Maybe not as good as the 49ers, but in a similar fashion that feels like every quarterback that goes to the Niners plays good football. This could potentially be one of those teams that a handful of quarterbacks could come to this Lions system and play pretty good football and win games. And I think, Jared Goff, he's has the talent. He just, I guess, I mean, he's shown he could play decent football with the Rams, and now we're seeing him just continue to play decent football here. But I guess we can switch over to the Packers now. I know you're not super high on them, but that's understandable.
Uh, yeah, it's a little bit of I like, but I don't know what to think with this team of Jordan Love. But I'm a
Hmm.
Bears fan. I'm gonna do what I do. I'm not gonna shy away from it. But honestly, I think this is probably like the toughest team to project, just because we don't know too much about the
Hmm.
quarterback situation, and their offense is really young. They have a lot of great options that I really like.
Hmm.
Their defense is good, but I think in a quarterback-driven league, this is a team that's not as surrounded like the Lions, where you just go like, okay, everything's well connected, and like the quarterback can just step in and go. Like I don't
Hmm.
think this is one of those systems. I think the loss of Aaron Rodgers on this team is going to be huge. Like he carried this team for like years, and I think last year um was no accident either with how they ended up, because like they still ended up right on the cusp of making the playoffs despite of like all the problems they had on offense and
Hmm.
defense. So while I think they have a bunch of talent on defense, I don't think they're going to be scoring enough where
Hmm.
it's going to be like, okay, the Lions, the Bears, the Saints,
Hmm.
the Broncos, like the Rams. I'm not confident they could beat those teams. So
Hmm.
then it leaves like very little options on who they can beat.
Yeah. I think. I mean, this is technically two games better than they played last season, but I also look and see that like quarterback play really wasn't that good last season either. I mean, like Aaron Rodgers is great and all, but like he didn't like straight up he did not play good last season. Which there's a lot of factors that go into it. Obviously, I don't think he's like washed per se, but he's maybe taken a step down. Obviously, there's lack of talent as well on this offense, but I do think that this team is technically built well enough to at least rely pretty heavily on the run game. You have uh, Jones and Dillon back there, and I feel like any game that they're in and they're playing moderately well is a game that they can stay in, especially just with the fact that their defense is like again middle of the pack decent, I think. And so I think that, and I think if Jordan Love plays like awful, like he is actually not a good quarterback in the slightest, I think 4-13 is a pretty reasonable record for that, maybe even worse. But I do think that if he plays again subpar, maybe in like the 3,000s ish pass yard room with mid 20s passing touchdowns and like maybe around 10 interceptions, then I do think that this team could be around that 9-8 range, which like it looks like good compared, I guess, to the record that you gave them, but it's still just above 500, which really isn't that elite per se. And so I think that 9-8 is probably their ceiling, but 4-13 is certainly their floor.
I think their actual record is like somewhere in the middle, to be honest. Like
Yeah.
this is just like a puzzling team where it's like, do I trust them against the Saints? Do I trust them against the Lions? Do I trust them against the like? I hope I can't trust them against the Bears. But like other than that, like it's just they have a lot of teams on their schedule where it's just if they still had Aaron Rodgers, I would give them wins. But I think because you don't have that certainty at the quarterback, it's just hard to say. Yeah, I trust them to rely on Jones and Dillon, and like the other team's not going to scheme against that.
Mm-hmm.
Where I feel confident in them winning. So that's why I'm kind of just like banging a head against my wall because like it's like how many games can you rely on the defense to win from the schedule?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I guess I mean we can kind of just see I guess how everything played out for them looking at their offense here, and so obviously Jordan Love is the big question here, but I guess like what do you see from the rest of the offense that I guess leads you to them really sucking, like Raiders level suck, Cardinals level suck, Commanders level
Well,
suck.
yeah, I mean I don't think they're gonna be as bad as the Cardinals. I really don't because I I love what they have in Christian Watson. I think he's like in a DJ Moore situation right now, to be honest with you. Like when he was in Carolina, where like he's the number one wide receiver, clear cut, no questions about it. But you have uncertainty in the quarterback spot where you can't fully unlock it. And then I really love Jaden Reed from the draft. I think that was a huge get for them. Um, I'm kind of sad if you look at my earlier segments on how I wanted the Bears like to mock draft, like who I would want for them. And I said Jaden Reed, and he happened to go to the Packers. I guess I will never live that down. But I think he could be a really good wide receiver too for them. Um, I like Dobbs, but like coming out of the draft and like in his rookie season, I never understood the hype about him because he would make these highlight reel catches, but then like for the routine catches, he just didn't have the consistent hands to like secure the catch. And that's
Mm-hmm.
always been a big problem of mine with him, where it's the same issue with Gabriel Davis. So I just see that situation where I'm like, boy, if he could fix that, he'd be a really good wide receiver. And you'll be surprised how hard that is of a fix to make. But I really like the group of tight ends they got from the draft. Like Musgrave and Tucker Kraft, really nice
Mm-hmm.
gets. But tight ends is notoriously like difficult to get in the rookie season. Like Kyle Pitts doesn't like just come out of nowhere. So um, well, I'm high on Laporta and Kincaid and talked about them enough. They win in different ways compared to like Musgrave and Kraft, where I feel like they have to get a couple years under their belt,
Mm-hmm.
like understand the blocking schemes and receiving schemes, where they can't be used in the offense right away.
Mm-hmm.
So heavy reliance on Jones and Dillon in the offensive line, and you're hoping like play action is gonna help like add a complement to this team. So it's very
Mm-hmm.
one dimensional in my opinion,
Mm-hmm.
which is why I don't have a favorable record.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I feel like we don't really have to talk too much about Aaron Jones and AJ Dillon. We know what they are. A phenomenal duo, one of the best running back duos in the league. But yeah, I feel like the receiver room, it's really boomer bust. I noticed you didn't really talk too much about Jaden Reed. I know you were were kind of sad during the draft in regards to their Jaden Reed pick. No, he was your golden boy, the the future Chicago Bear, but unfortunately,
He's still a good sleeper. He's a good sleeper option in
yeah.
drafts. Well, we'll be talking about more about them next week for sure. But yeah,
Hmm.
you got
Yeah.
me. If only they had Jaden Reed, I would feel a lot more confident about the receiving room and where the Bears are taking off.
Yeah, but yeah, I mean, I guess a question mark is the depth behind these top three. Like, I think this top three can be a formidable trio, but I look behind this and like, I guess do question the quality of players they have here. Whereas I feel like we look at like the Bengals and their trio, and like their trio is like phenomenal, and any one of them could be a number one guy. But behind that trio, it's like again not great players, but like I feel like the Bengals are kind of guys that have somewhat reputable players that I feel like I could trust to be backup number twos and threes. Versus I look at this squad and I mean maybe they are, but like from what I know off the top of my head, these guys don't really scream elite backup wide receivers because the top three are still like relatively unproven. Um, but yeah, I do like the tight end room. I heard from camp that Musgrave is getting first team reps, which doesn't really surprise me just looking at the tight end room in general. I mean, like I guess Josiah DeGuara could be competing for those reps, but um, I mean, I feel like it's almost a given that Musgrave probably will start the season, and maybe it does take him a couple years. Their O line though, I do like. I believe Zach Tom is supposed to be the starting right tackle this upcoming season. I know he filled in for David Bakhtiari um, parts of the season due to him like being injured and whatnot, and I believe he actually played pretty well there. And so if he can replicate some of that on the right side, I know he has a lack of experience playing right tackle, but I know if he can play somewhat similar on that right side of the line, I think this team kind of takes a step forward in terms of what they can do because of how good their offensive line is. But it is a big what if of how he can play on the opposite side. And it's not like you want to switch David Bakhtiari around because, again, he's like a staple of this offensive line. And he probably would play great right tackle, but why not play your best offensive player at his best position?
Yeah, and the yeah, would keep that the same. I think the left side of the line is amazing. I wouldn't touch
Mm-hmm.
that. The right side of the line is a little bit weaker, but
Mm-hmm.
the Green Bay's always been great for their offensive line play.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm pretty confident in that group and like they can build a stable running game from
Mm-hmm.
it. Um, on the receiver spot, there are like a couple of promising options. Like Bo Melton and Grant DuBose have promise,
Mm-hmm.
um, and they need like the reps like to where they can be contributors. And
Mm-hmm.
like if one of them has to sub for Dobbs, I'd be fine with that.
Mm-hmm.
But I hear you on the rest of the receivers. It's kind of like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, what happens if Watson gets hurt? Like
Mm-hmm.
then they're screwed. Then
Yeah.
they're definitely screwed.
Uh-huh.
And also their quarterback depth is not like if something happens with Jordan Love, I am not confident in the rest of these guys. I get they got Clifford from the draft, but I don't something's off with this team. Like it's
Mm-hmm.
like I would have really loved for them to get a veteran quarterback who has played
Mm-hmm.
in the Fleur system. Like I mean, like if they could have invested in Mariota, like just to back up Love to give them something,
Mm-hmm.
I think that would have been a better use of their investment.
Mm-hmm.
But I think they're totally confident in Jordan Love. So
Yeah.
I mean, it might not matter if he's able to stay healthy.
Yeah. I mean, maybe Sean Clifford's the next Brock Purdy guy and leads the Packers to like a 13 win season and gets them like to the Super Bowl. You never know, man.
There you go. It could happen.
Yeah.
I just don't think the Packers are the 49ers system right now.
Yeah.
So
You know, all
it
they
could happen.
need is
I'm not
yeah.
ruling it out. I'm not ruling it out, but I am
Yeah.
highly skeptical.
Yeah. All they need is some random dude named Mike Thomas, right? Like all these other random NFC teams do have
Yeah.
some random Mike Thomas skill position player to lead them to glory. But maybe they got someone named Mike Thomas on the defense. I actually don't know, so we'll check. But
Ooh, Keandre, close.
Yeah, you know, it's close
What do you
enough.
think about this defense? A
Uh,
lot of Georgia guys.
yeah, I think that this is a pretty solid defense. You have really, really good players at like a handful of positions, which I think, at least what we've seen so far in terms of the other teams in this division, that is something that they may be lacking. And like, granted, we haven't talked. They may have a better defense than the Vikings, but this may be the best defense in the division, just from the fact that their elite players are truly elite, followed up by a lot of like serviceable, like decent starters, which I think the other two teams that we've talked about are just filled with a lot of guys that are solid, serviceable starters that could likely start on a lot of other teams, but aren't elite talents that people are raving about. Like how we talked about, Derwin James could be a game changer for the Lions, or elite pass rusher like Khalil Mack could be a game changer for the Chicago Bears. Where the Packers do have those elite players, like Kenny Clark, um, Jair Alexander, like to name like the big two names. But then you do have guys like Rasul Douglas who kind of showed out last season. Darnell Savage is pretty solid. Quay Walker was really good last season. Devondre Campbell is a solid player. Preston Smith isn't half bad either. And so they even got Lucas Van Ness in the draft. Wasn't he like they got a lot of good players that can become really like become star players, but they don't need them to do that immediately just because they already have those star players already.
Yeah, the weakness for them is defensive tackle, but how much of that is going to be a weakness when you have Kenny Clark right next to him? So,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe Jonathan Owens. I think losing Adrian Amos to the Jets was kind of underrated because he has always been
Mm-hmm.
like decent where he doesn't allow the big play to happen no matter what.
Mm-hmm.
And I think losing him might be like a blow to them.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I agree. Best defense in the division. We're highlighted by Kenny Clark, Jair Alexander, Jair Alexander. Like you got Darnell Savage, Rasul Douglas, Campbell, Walker, Preston Smith. They're all great guys, good guys that
Mm-hmm.
you want to have like complementing your stars. And Rashawn Gary, we completely talked about forgot to talk about him.
Mm-hmm.
When he played last season, he was one of the best edge rushers in the
Mm-hmm.
NFL. So if he gets on that same track, like you got a great pass rusher, great defensive lineman, elite cornerback, highlighting this defense, this could easily be a top 10 defense as well.
Mm-hmm.
I know we talked about a lot of teams with great defenses. Packers
Mm-hmm.
are right up there, maybe not as good as the Bills, but they're still like in that stage where the defense is going to be the best part of this team next season.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So yeah, I don't know if like top five would be their category, just because there are a couple defenses that are quite literally loaded every position top to bottom. But from that like eight to maybe even top seven to top 10 range, like or I guess rank 7 to 10 range in terms of defenses. I think this is certainly a defense that falls under that category of just outside of basically every position being elite players, which I think is a big part of the reason that I do see them winning a handful of games. Um, just especially just the fact that they have good running back play and they have a good defense, which means that they have some form of offense at bare minimum, and they have a defense that can at least keep them in games more so than I think we can say for the Lions, despite their additions, and the Bears, despite some of their additions they've had as well.
Yeah, yeah. This team is going to be
Mm-hmm.
relying a lot more on the defense and the running game you mentioned for
Mm-hmm.
sure. We'll see how well it pans out because once you get deep into like December and January,
Mm-hmm.
that when they're in those third and eights and third and sevens, who's gonna get the ball? Who will is Jordan Love gonna deliver the first down? Like those questions are still
Mm-hmm.
unanswered, and they're even evaluating him for the first 8 games of the season
Mm-hmm.
before they know whether he's the quarterback of the future. So
Mm-hmm.
this is probably the hardest team we had to cover in this division.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. But you got one more team left. Hopefully, you're not super bored of our opinions. That I think this is pretty fun. Josh has got some cool thoughts on this NFC North. Obviously, he's a huge fan of them. But next up, we do have the Minnesota Vikings, and I also have these guys at a relatively similar record to the rest of the division here at 10-7 right now. So like I said earlier, like while I do think that the Lions are probably the best team here, this division, especially the number 2 spot, is really up for grabs in terms of I have the Bears going 9-8, I have the Packers going 9-8, and now I have the Lions going 10-7. Where I even have like the not the Lions, the Vikings going 10-7, and the Lions going with 11 wins. And well, I guess they technically lost a couple pieces this last offseason. Um, I mean, their offense is intact. I think they have a lot of really good pieces on both sides of the football, and like there's like the jokes about Kirk Cousins not being that good or anything, and like maybe he's benefited from like good receivers and just receiving talent on his teams in general. But the big thing is he's good enough to get the ball to his playmakers, which I think gives them the edge against a lot of these teams that they go head to head. And they are one of those teams I think that win a lot of games that or wins a lot of games they maybe shouldn't, and loses a lot of games that they should win. And so it's one of those really weird polarizing teams. I mean, here I for the most part have them winning games that I there's a few that are bad, but I'm winning games that I think that they should win. But I mean, I do have them technically beating both the Chiefs and the Bengals on here, but I also have them losing to a Packers who you think are going to do good. There's a lost to the Chargers, and I mean, even on your side, I wouldn't be surprised if they lost a couple of like I guess silly games like the Panthers or they could, for all we know, lose to the Falcons just because the Vikings got a Viking sometime. But um, yeah, I guess. What are your thoughts on this Vikings team?
Yeah, this is more me saying they're going to come back to earth this season. If you look at a lot of their wins last season, um, they just got they won the game against Chicago by 7. They won against
Mm-hmm.
Miami by 8. They won against Arizona by 8. They won against Washington Commanders by 3. Buffalo by 3 in OT in like a crazy game. New England by 7. They won against the Colts by 3. The Jets by 5. Like a lot of their games were one-win games by the skin of their teeth type
Mm-hmm.
deals, where like nobody knew what kind of offense Kevin McConnell was going to bring to this team. And don't get me wrong, he's improved it a ton, but this is more me saying they're going to rely more on Kirk Cousins with their additions through the air, less on Dalvin Cook, who's not there anymore, and you're getting Madison replaced. I think the drop off is going to be significant enough where they're not going to win those one-win games, one possession games when it comes to that. So, granted, they're going to have to face the brunt of that schedule because of it.
Mm-hmm.
Where even though I had them winning against the Eagles, I could easily see them losing that. And I
Mm-hmm.
could see them even beating the Panthers or the Bears, like I mentioned. But I think the quarterback play here is going to be huge. Can Kirk Cousins be consistent? Um, After all, they did, despite finishing their season with 12 wins, they did
I think
lose
it
to the
was 13.
Giants in the playoffs. Like, so it's just it's a very Cowboys like team where it's just like
Mm-hmm.
you have high expectations, and then every time you do, they let you down.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, like I have them, being down 3 games compared to last season, which I mean, it's a moderately big jump for a team that did go 13-4, and but I do think that Kirk Cousins is one of the best quarterbacks in the NFC right now. Um, and I mean, like, obviously, it's not all stats, but like the stats do back up the fact that regardless of like, I don't know, he does put up good numbers. And I mean, we see like, I guess, bad quarterbacks with good talent around them, like, not put up good numbers. And the fact that we're able to see Kirk Cousins do that, like, shows that he's at least good enough to get the ball to his playmakers' hands, which I think is overlooked, and everyone jokes about he can't win in primetime and whatnot, but like he has. I mean, it's a really well coached team, and you like mentioned the close games all the time, but I mean that's what separates the good teams from the bad teams is are you able to win in those crunch time situations? Because I mean, you look at the Bears, right? They had a lot of close games, but in the end of the day, they weren't able to close out and win those games. Whereas the Vikings, they were in a lot of those close games as well, but they were able to come out and, get the close victories. And I'm sure like the Bears would rather have the situation like I'd rather be on the winning side of close games than losing a bunch of close games. And so I think that the Vikings, well, maybe not as good as they were last season, are able to maintain a decent level of success and be competing for that first place in the division.
Yeah, and I think more of it is the talent on the roster, like
Hmm.
the between the two teams, because like Bears like absolutely had no talent last season
Hmm.
outside of Justin Fields and stands a
Hmm.
few good players. Whereas like the
Hmm.
Vikings were playoff ready. Like they invested
Hmm.
into Jerry Smith. They already had the number one wide receiver in Justin Jefferson. They made the
Hmm.
move to get T.J. Hawkinson to even buffer that passing game. They had
Hmm.
Adam Thielen, Dalvin Cook. They were ready. They were ready to make a
Hmm.
playoff move. They were just doing like a retink. So
Yeah.
from that standpoint, I think the one possessions games favored them, and the fact that they
Hmm.
brought a totally different system, like threw other teams for a loop.
Hmm.
I think
Yeah.
now that teams understand what kind of system McConnell runs and how to shut it down, it just comes down to, do I trust him against the Eagles, Chiefs, 49ers, um,
Hmm.
Saints, Broncos, Bears, even Bengals, Packers? And if it comes down to one possessions against those kind of teams, I don't think so.
Yeah. I mean, it's pretty. I mean, if the game plan's to just throw it up to Justin Jefferson half the time, teams already know that Justin Jefferson's the star, and you can't stop that. And so, I mean, like, what are you gonna
That's
do?
the
Triple
dilemma
team
with this team,
Jefferson?
man. Yeah.
And so, like, yeah, I mean, like, the NFL had all season to figure out this team, and they continued to do well. And sure, that's, I mean, they may do better against them this upcoming season, but I mean, we can kind of just look at the roster and I guess look at how we think things get affected. I guess this upcoming season, but you know, the man with the dog in him, Kirk Cousins, leading the way. I love him so much. He's a cool guy. But I guess like, what do you think about just this roster as a whole? I guess.
I think the receivers are great. You don't need to change the thing about them. They got the
Hmm.
depth. They got the type of guys you want in the starting end. And I I really like Jalen Rager and Jalen Naylor, both the Jalen's, like as 4 and 5 receivers. I think that's right where they should be. Like because they can start in this league and they can be contributors, but they're not forced to be it. And I think that's like the perfect, like this is kind of like how you want your top 5 receivers to look like, in my opinion. So that's great. Um,
Hmm.
I also like their tight ends, like what they look for in tight ends with Hawkinson and Oliver. I think it's perfect. Hawkins is one of the lead guys I would also target in fantasy if you can't get Kelsey, obviously. Um, but I I look at like the skill positions and I'm saying they're good there. Um, my question like is like similar to the Packers. Like, how does their right side of the line fare, and can Kirk Cousins compensate for that? Because like unlike the Lions, like like it's going to be a little bit harder to get to Jared Goff because there's pretty much no weaknesses on their offensive line. For the Vikings, there is. So then there's a way you can kind of apply pressure to the Kirk Cousins because of the weaknesses on the offensive line. So that would be like the kind of weaknesses on my team. For me, I've never been like a Kirk Cousins fan where I'm just like I've never seen him as a top 10 talent in the QB position in the NFL, despite his
Hmm.
numbers and despite what I've seen. Like as far as like what he brings to teams,
Hmm.
like and it's more just like dang, if I would like I wish they had like an AFC like super weapon from the quarterback on this team because I think their potential would be so much more higher. But I definitely think with Kirk Cousins, they could still make the playoffs despite like my low expectations of them this
Hmm.
season.
Yeah. I mean, like, if we're talking about like playing better, I mean, Kirk Cousins did have 4,500 pass yards last season. I don't know how
Yes.
much better you're asking for an AFC quarterback to do in place of Kirk Cousins' numbers last year. I mean, how many other guys had over 4,500 pass yards?
I mean, I would like his interceptions to go down. Like,
Hmm.
I would like single digit interceptions. That's and like the rating to go slightly up. But um,
Yeah.
for but I hear you. I hear you. He like for passing yardage, he's always been good in that category. For me, the interceptions have just been like that, and then the bad decision making too. When pressure
Hmm.
comes, I just don't think he handles those aspects of it. So you don't kind of see those like in the stats itself. But
Yeah.
like if he proves me wrong, hey, all props to him.
Yeah. I mean, like, I do think he is meant. I mean, we look at like again, their Colts come. I mean, Colts sucked last season, but the Colts comeback win from last season kind of. I mean, shows the team as a whole is pretty
That
mentally
was
tough,
cold. Yeah, that was cool.
and like where it's like they are down, and it's like I feel like a not so mentally tough quarterback would pretty easily fizzle under those kind of situation, like that type of environment, where like he may play good, but like end up not winning the game. Whereas, I mean, the Vikings defense played phenomenal that second half as well, but I mean, we saw the offense completely like shift gears in that second half, completely listen to their coaching adjustments and just completely tear apart that Colts defense and basically made them look like high schoolers and like. And so I think, yeah, maybe. I mean, I wouldn't say he's one of the best quarterbacks in the league, but in terms of the NFC, I do think that he is one of the best guys you could get within this NFC group. And I mean, you look at like Aaron
Yeah,
Rodgers last season. Technically, he had double-digit interceptions as well, but I feel like you have more hype on Aaron Rodgers than you do Kirk Cousins, who Rodgers
yeah.
had it technically.
I think for me, it's also like the coaching and the quarterback marriage has to
Hmm.
hold too. And I think, yeah, I think it was a little bit like I don't think Lafleur is as good of a coach as people think. Whereas
Hmm.
like McConnell, I think is a slightly better coach.
Yeah.
So I think that definitely helps. But also, like Aaron Rodgers didn't have a Justin Jefferson on his team,
Hmm.
and I think and that was his first season without Devontae Adams. So like to your point, like Kirk Cousins doesn't have to be an AFC like super weapon quarterback for this
Hmm.
team to gel. Like I definitely when you have a guy like Justin Jefferson, a lot of
Hmm.
people consider him the best wide receiver in the league. I would not
Hmm.
argue with you if you think so. Um, he's probably like the biggest like force multiplier for this team. That
Hmm.
if they're going to the Super Bowl or going to the deep in the playoffs, it's because of him.
Hmm.
So I totally hear you. Like if Kirk Cousins has a great season, props to him.
Hmm.
And I think one of the major reasons why is going to be JJ right there, Jay
Hmm.
Jettis.
Yeah. Um. Yeah. So I guess just the final bit now that we have is just this Vikings defense. Ooh.
I've been
Uh,
wanting to see this defense for a while because I haven't kept too much into tabs into it. But
mhm.
looking at it now, I really like what they did with getting Byron Murphy from free agency. That was a good move. Um,
Mhm.
like they still have Daniel Hunter on their team, so they might have resigned him. I thought he was a
I
free
guess.
agent. Okay, but it's I'd say it's kind of like they have slightly better guys like as far as like the best overall player than I'd say Detroit does. Um, Daniil Hunter, I don't think is as good as Aiden Hutchinson, but he's still a
Mhm.
quality pass rusher. Harrison Smith is probably the better safety than anybody in the league, anybody in that division. Close one between Eddie Jackson and him, but I would pick Smith.
Mhm.
Um, but like the rest of the guys are like some guys are quality options and some like I just don't know. So
Mhm.
I put them somewhere between like Detroit slash Chicago
Mhm.
and Green Bay because they do have a talented like couple
Mhm.
guys on the defense, but like other guys like how does it look? Like their front three and the D line looks great. Like it
Mhm.
looks solid, but it's not like damn we got to double block one of those dudes.
Mhm.
Whereas like Daniil Hunter is like oh we got to double block him. So then it's like
Mhm.
okay that's a pretty good like pass rushing set. And like Jordan Hooks is like a good linebacker that's just
Mhm.
had bad injury luck.
Yeah.
But it's like the other pieces where I'm just like, how are Davenport and Booth gonna do? Because I think those are the
Mhm.
weaknesses I would target.
Yeah. I think that this defense is like somewhat on par with the Bears and the Lions right now, where it's like I mean, like Harrison Smith, yeah, he is good, but he is also on the older side. And you're like he's obviously stepped down in terms of I guess overall play just because he is older. He hasn't played as good as he was in his prime, and it's like no shot or malice towards that, like towards him on that. It's just how it is, you know. And so I think that there's a handful of good players on this team, similar to the Lions and similar to the Bears, but I think that there really isn't that standout player that I'd like to see that makes me think that like or makes like other offenses think about, oh, we got to watch out for Marcus Davenport. Or like he's good, but like not, oh, we got to specifically scheme for that guy good, and so and it's not like, oh, hey, make sure to not throw towards Byron Murphy. Like I mean, he's a good cornerback, but like you don't talk about Byron Murphy and think like, oh man, it's it's Murphy Island over there. Um, and so I think again, it's like, I mean, they show that I think this is a really well coached team, which I think maybe makes me think that they're slightly better than the Bears and the Lions in terms of the defense, just because we've seen this unit coached really well, and we've seen this team play in the playoffs despite losing to the Giants. Which, I mean, the Giants were a good team last year; you can't deny that. But I think that just, I guess, playoff experience plus good coaching, I think makes me give them the edge over the likes of the Bears and the Lions in terms of, if I were to like rank every defense side by side by side, I might give these guys the edge.
Yeah. I would say their defense would be better than those two. Um, it's just more like I Davenport came from the Saints, right? When
Yeah, he
he
did.
was a free agent. Yeah, so he showed some flashes, but it wasn't like enough where you're thinking,
Hmm.
okay, he's gonna be like a Zadarius Smith, like coming out of
Hmm.
Baltimore when everybody's like, oh, he's gonna be
Hmm.
a really good full time rusher if he gets that role, or like a Pernell McPhee back in the day, going to the Bears a couple years back. So um, I just look at like the rest, like this defense as a whole, and I'm gonna be like, what's the difference between them last year,
Hmm.
where they were the weakness on this team, versus this year, where it's
Hmm.
they have a lot of good talent on paper, but how does it all gel together? I think
Hmm.
that's gonna be a huge question mark for this team, just because of like how bad they were last year itself. So
Yeah.
this will probably be the needle mover on like how I think about this team,
Hmm.
because I did have this team at 8-9.
Hmm.
Um, given that I have my qualms about the quarterback play,
Hmm.
but as far as like turnovers per se, and then actually like where I think he stands against elites, and then also like parts of the defense, like how much improvement should I expect from this defense as well?
Hmm. Yeah. I'm interested to kind of like go through each, I guess, defense unit as a whole and rank all of them, just because we have mentioned, I mean, throughout this entire, I guess, record prediction that we have mentioned a handful of teams being really elite defenses, but um, obviously there has to be a worst defense in the league. And I mean, I don't think these guys are the worst defense. I don't think any of these teams are the worst defense, but it'll be
I
interesting to
don't think
kind of
so
see
either.
um, how you rank everybody. And obviously, I think that's probably what we'll be doing in the coming weeks as well. Just kind of going through different position groups, ranking them, maybe ranking offensive and defense units in total as well. But um, yeah, I mean, this is kind of all I have for now on this defense. I think you hit on a lot of really good points there. Um, I think, yeah, I mean, maybe the Bears and the Lions defense have more like better potential, but again, the Vikings, they're just a more experienced team. But that's kind of all I got for today. But remember, this last bit is super important. We have an Instagram. Remember to follow it because it's cool, kind of. We post cool graphics on amon.a.mission. You know, Job spends a lot of time making cool thumbnails, and I think everybody should see it because they're cool graphics. So don't ignore it. Pay attention. Give us a like. Comment that you hate our thoughts and opinions because it drives us with some more engagement and then lets other people see our posts. So I don't really care what you say as long as it's cool. Anyways,
Hey, let us know what do you think about Kirk Cousins, because we're clearly on like opposite sides of the spectrum. Like Korshan tends to look at like the passing yardage and like where they finished with the 12 wins and how the team has a lot of mental toughness too. Whereas I'm I'm looking at him and his ability, and then like the interceptions. And I'm doing a lot of comparisons to elite quarterbacks. So we'll be interested to hear like what your takes are
Hmm.
on that, and then whatever kind of topics you have interest in. Like now that
Hmm.
we finished the summer series, really exciting because now we're gonna look into like the preseason games that are coming up. We might do a fantasy draft next episode. We gotta decide what we want to do. Maybe do a couple rankings and whatnot. But if you got any suggestions, leave them in the comments below. Give us a follow, like Corsian said,
Hmm.
and we hope you enjoyed the summer series and our previews on each of the teams.
Hmm. Yep, but that's all we got for today. Remember to leave your feedback, like Josh said, or else the Bears will
We'll
be
come after
bad.
you.
I don't know. Anyways, that's all for today. See you around.
Peace.